Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Your Daily Detroit. It is Tuesday, August 27th, 2024, coming to you from our studio at Tech Town. I am Jer Stays, and across the table from me is none other than Fletcher Sharpe. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Spent Sunday expecting to be on Belle Isle for about 4 to 5 hours playing softball. We were on Belle Isle for 2 hours playing softball because we lost our first game. So while I was getting baked in the nice heat on Belle Isle, Jer told me he was going to be somewhere else. Probably had air conditioning there, but where were you?
I was at the Detroit Historical Museum. Yes, there was air conditioning. Yes, it was absolutely wonderful. And here's the thing. It's getting to be that like scorcher time again. By the way, congratulations to everybody who's got their kids going back to school right now. Although it's so hot that Detroit Public Schools are going ahead and cutting classes early for Monday, Tuesday, and then possibly Wednesday. But yeah, I beat the heat, went to the Detroit Historical Museum, and saw a historic lions exhibit that just opened up, talking about lions of yore, everything from old helmets and footballs and memorabilia to clips. Here's the thing. Did you know that the Lions started playing at UAD?
I did.
It's fascinating photos and old footage, man.
Only because I used to live around there and not when they played, obviously.
Come on. Are you secretly older?
Benjamin
Button?
I went to Detroit Mercy to go look at some stuff, and my father was with me, and I had some questions like, why do they have some memorabilia from the Lions in here? Like, they never played here. And he's like, actually, they did. He loves being like, actually, they did for anything. And he's like, actually, they did. And I was like, well, you would know because, you know, you're old, and didn't go over as well as I thought it would. My neighbor went to one of the openings for the exhibit, and she took some pictures and sent me with, look, I'm with Rory hanging out. And I was like, all right, that definitely is Rory, the Lions mascot. And I was like, what's up? She's like, the exhibit. And I was like, oh, wow, it's opening pretty soon. She's like, this weekend. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to get down there sometime soon because I think I'm pretty knowledgeable in Lions stuff, but it could never really hurt to go look at history and learn some more stuff.
Yeah, if you want to find it, it's on the second floor, kind of tucked past the body drop. You know what I'm talking about, the body drop area there. And there's like the Arsenal of Democracy on the second floor. It's in the back over there. There's a whole gallery, everything from old helmets to the new blue. Got to see that up front. I really love the old footage. I love the old pictures. It's interesting, though, because of the Lions' history. It's like early City of Champions, 1935, 1950 something, and then gap. And then like today, like there's a whole section devoted to Dan Campbell too.
I mean, it would make sense. Some people say it's harder to go to a struggling city and like make them relevant than it is to go to a good city and make them even better. And I would tend to agree with that a little bit because you have to win a lot of people over. And I was a skeptic of Dan Campbell. You can replay almost every episode, and I was pretty harsh in some of the things I said. And he's proved me wrong in almost all of them. Almost all of them, he's come in, he's done the work, he's understood the culture, he's understood whatever. So yeah, I think even in its infantile stages of being a head coach, he deserves a segment because he's made people, obviously the whole team has, but he's been a spearhead. He's made people in the city actually care about the Lions again. Like people who were like, I'm never watching a football game ever again, I'm done, are like, did you see that play during preseason? I'm like, I thought you were done watching football. Now you're watching preseason? Like, what's up, man?
I think it was standing room only for the Lions preseason game.
I'm not surprised. Again, it's Hendon Hooker and Jake Fromm, who actually, fun fact, was the starting quarterback over Matt Stafford at Georgia for a year. I think we're just collecting Georgia quarterbacks. It's obviously not Amon-Ra. It's not Jared Goff. It's not all of the starters, but like people are still excited to see some of the backups play. Hendon Hooker looked electric as a quarterback from them. And Vaki, the running back they picked up who played defensive back, he's got teams talking. Teams are already talking about how like, I think we missed on a steal. Like we think we missed on a quality player that we all could have gotten and chose not to. So yeah, it's electric air when you're talking highly about the backups for the Lions in a preseason game.
I want to make a mention, too, in case you've not gone to the Historical Museum. I feel like it's underrated. It's right there in the Midtown District, kitty corner or caddy corner, I don't know which one's correct, from the DIA and across from the library. I've been going for a long time. In fact, one of my favorite memories as a kid is like getting lost in the old streets of Detroit downstairs. Now, if you are a city resident, because it is city tax dollars right now, they're working on a millage to make it more regional or at least countywide. But if you are a city resident right now, you can actually go for free and get a free membership. I would say if you've got the cheddar, throw a couple bucks into the container, if you will. But regular admission is only $10. There's multiple levels. If you're going to go see the Lions exhibit, I think that's one of many things to check out. You've got the Arsenal of Democracy. You've got stuff that talks about 1967. You've got the old streets of Detroit. You've got the Glancy trains, which I went on my own, a little bit of a trip out by myself, and I was like, okay. And so I just played with the trains a little bit. I just enjoy the historical museum so much. There is no reason not to go often if you are a city resident. And if you're not a city resident, I think it's so great to support one of the only institutions that really values and curates Detroit history. Now, I know that the Henry Ford is there, and the Henry Ford is amazing. We featured them on the show. They're actually going to be having some other things. We're going to feature them on the show in the future. But the Detroit Historical Museum is all local, and I think that's really special, Fletcher.
Yeah, you always want to see local stuff do well, especially when it's within the city, and especially when it's doing good things within the city about the history, the great history of the city, even if it is just the sports, which there's more than just sports there. I know the topic came up because of sports. But you always want to see those places grow and be as big as they can. If not be as big as they can, then be as well supported as possible.
Yeah, and when this episode goes up, by that time, I will have a post on Instagram with a little bit of video from my little tour, but I still encourage, go down there. Okay, for our second segment, we've got a listener question to answer from Larry. And are you ready for this, Fletcher Sharpe?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how about a list of the top 10 Detroit Lions from 1965 on? That is a pretty interesting task because that eliminates the championship teams in the 50s.
So when I read this question, I went way too gung-ho, and I did a starting 11. I did a starting for offense and defense. I got some special teams players, and then they're like, we have X amount of time. You cannot do that. And I'm like, that's very fair.
That said, I think we should still share those lineups. I think we should do it on our newsletter or social media or somewhere because you put the work in. I want to see that just in an audio format. Going through 30-some names is a little much.
Yeah. I mean, there are some names here that some people might know. There are some names that I think everyone will know. There are some names that I think only people who were born a bit early or really, really diehard people might know. There's always some controversy. I think lists like these are healthy because it not only does it let people make an opinion and then stand behind it, but also it sheds some light on some players who typically might not get talked about a lot. And that's all important when it comes to like team history.
For sure. Let's start with number 10.
I didn't have it in order. I just did it chronologically. So number 10 is not the least important for me. It's just the oldest. Alex Karras, defensive tackle. Before they had Ndamukong Suh, before they had Sean Rogers, before they had even Robert Porcher, who was more of a defensive end, Alex Karras was like the main person who they thought of a defensive tackle with the Lions. When it's like, we need someone to go and make a tackle, make a play, get someone down, maybe not sack someone, but at least get pressure. Alex Karras was a name when you're like, the Lions defensive tackle, him. And my father talked about him a lot, not necessarily too much, but something where it's like, I definitely know this name. It's not someone who I was like, who type of thing.
I like this approach because in reality, I don't think you can compare 1965 or 1970 football with the modern game. I feel like they're very different, like animals to me.
And that's coming into my next person, actually, Melfar. Melfar was really good for his time. For his time with the Lions, Melfar was a really good player. If you took his numbers and put him in now, you're like, what was he, like the fourth string running back? Like, what are these numbers? So, like, obviously, from one era to now, you might see a quarterback like Terry Bradshaw with the Steelers. They were like, he was a pretty good quarterback. It's like, oh, you mean the year he threw for like 1,900 yards and like 12 touchdowns? Like, yeah, he was a Pro Bowler. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Don't know how that one worked out. And you look at it now where it's like you got people throwing 50 touchdowns that are like, yeah, this guy's not all pro. Do you see how bad he is? And it's like, okay, so obviously eras are different. So I'm glad you brought that up. But for when he played, Melfar was very good. His rookie season, 1967, NFL all-rookie team, all-pro in the 70s, Pro Bowl twice. His career's kind of cut short just through injuries of being a running back in that time where like they relied on you. Also, ran a whole lot of dealerships, and his name is very well known, not just from being a football player, but also, cars.
When you said the name, I immediately saw his face, saw the cape, and everything else. because they're so familiar to me. Because he was before my time to watch him on the field, but he was definitely in my time for local TV commercials.
I mean, when I didn't go to school with his grandson, but like we went to competing school, so I got to know him through there, and it was super hard to like not see Mel Farr and not go superstar. Like, obviously,
I literally thought it when you were introducing him, and I was like, I have to resist.
Especially when his grandson was like making plays against my team, where I'm like, you're not a superstar. You're not your grandfather.
Number 8.
Number 8, someone who's talked about glowingly as a pass catching end for the Lions for quite some time, really until last year. Nothing to do with him. But Charlie Sanders, tight end. All the records Sam Laporta broke last year were all Charlie Sanders' records. So, like, it shows you, one, how long it's been since the Lions have had a really good tight end who can make plays. But two, also how good Sam Laporta was. Because, like, for almost all the records by Charlie Sanders that were, like, for a season or for a short span of time to now be Sam Laporta like that, like, that's a great player. But Charlie Sanders was a great player in his own right. I won't say modernize the tight end because I think a few more people did that, but he definitely showed that tight ends can be more than just secondary offensive tackles. And you don't really get to think about a player like that because, like you said early on, it's like the city of champions from like the 30s, 40s, and you get to the 50s, it's kind of and then from that point until like now, they're like Detroit as a football team, and they wear blue, and that was all people would talk about. So you don't really get to talk about players like this unless you really are in it. But Charlie Sanders was someone who definitely, if he got his hands on a ball, he's definitely bringing it down.
7,
Lem Barney, cornerback. One of the few people on this list from before who I think actually, I'm not going to say would be a star today, but I think he could still play in today's era of football as a cornerback. Cornerbacks before typically are allowed to be way more handsy, whereas now you put hands on a receiver and they fall down. It's pass interference and whatever. But Lem Barney was quick enough to be able to use his hands, but also get in front of you and make plays. I think if you were doing a best Lions team defense ever, he's definitely the starting quarterback on one side, maybe even the number 1 cornerback. But yeah, a player like that, it's unfortunate that he was a part of the team when he was, because he kind of gets washed out because it's, again, that the little desert era of when the Lions did not really have anyone who was notable to talk about.
6,
the original number 20, Billy Sims.
Oh, that's right.
Billy Sims, who, like, I remember seeing a jersey and seeing Sims on the back and being confused. Like, that's not Barry Sanders. What's going on with that? And my dad was like, someone used to wear that jersey. And I'm like, nuh-uh. That's Barry Sanders' number. 20 is only Barry Sanders. And then he showed me video highlights of Billy Sims, who could not be any more different of a running back than Barry Sanders in like any capacity. But like, he had an explosive style. Didn't really last him very long because, unlike Barry, he ran into contact. He could run away, but he chose not to most of the time.
Is that shade?
No, it's just like, Barry doesn't need to hit people. He could go by them and be fine. Billy Sims is like, I could run around you, but I'm going to enjoy running over you. And that's probably why he retired when he did and is like, ooh, my hands don't feel great. Whereas Barry was like, I'm retiring because we're going to be bad next year. And also, I don't want to end up like these other players. Again, similar era. They were in the same year gap, but like different era of how they ran. But Billy Sims is always entertaining, and whenever people talk about his time with the Lions, they always talk about how brief it was, but how they wish it could have got a few more years because he was an explosive player. And honestly, for this next person, again, the numbers do not denote how important they are or anything. It's just chronologically for me because I was trying to break it down in a way that people understood. If Billy Sims had not retired when he did and the Lions had not been bad as a result, they would not have gotten this next person.
Number 5.
The next number 20, Barry Sanders.
Really? Okay. Because of chronological.
No, if it was in terms of importance, it's like it's him, Calvin Johnson, and maybe Matt Stafford.
So would that be your top 3? Barry, Calvin, and Stafford?
My favorite or like most important?
Ooh, let's save this for after.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 5, Barry Sanders.
Barry Sanders, who still is the most electric runner in the history of this sport. I think he's the greatest running back ever. I'm sure everyone who lives in this state does. I'm sure everyone who does not live in Texas thinks it's Emmitt Smith, who literally played until he was like 39 just to hold on to a record, buried has a few thousand yards off, but also he retired young. He probably still could have broken that record if he wanted to. But his impact was so tremendous in the sport. Started watching kids run backwards 3 yards to go gain like 5 or 6. He inspired people like Dante Hall, kick returner, Eddie Drummond, kick returner, players who get the ball in space and are like, I'm doing something crazy. I know he inspired Reggie Bush's running style as well. Reggie just made it his own because he's an athletic freak. Super, super important and instrumental, and also a good sport because typically people score touchdowns. They want to do cartwheels and whatever. He scored, gave the ball to the ref, went right back. Let someone else spike the ball if they want, went right back to the sideline. So if you were one of those people who's big in respectability politics, you loved Barry for that reason alone.
Number 4.
Lomas Brown.
Lomas. I love Lomas. I saw Lomas at the draft. Oh, my God.
Yeah, consistent outside tackle, consistently got hands on people, protected Scott Mitchell, which is hard because Scott Mitchell is very slow.
You know, I really would love to get Lomas Brown on this show. I feel like he'd be a hoot to talk to.
Kind of want to ask him about how fast Scott Mitchell was, but I feel like I've already answered that. But he was a consistent tackle and just someone who got his hands on you and you were not going anywhere. I'm sure his job was made a little bit harder by Barry just, running around where it's like I'm pushing the guy to the left because Barry's running right. And then Barry cuts back left and you're like, I pushed him into a tackle. My bad. But no, consistent player. And I'm glad the Lions found a capacity for him to come back and do, because when you have players like that who do so much for your organization on the field and off the field, you want to find ways to make sure they stay around because they're that important.
He's an electric bear of a personality. He's just so great to be around.
Nice.
And I don't know him, but I've met, in passing or whatever, and I see the interactions with him. He's such a great ambassador for the Lions brand.
Everyone sees him. It's always a warm greeting, and it's never like when they walk away, they're not like, ugh. They're always like, they're always seem like he made people feel happier going forward.
All right, we're getting to the home stretch. Number 3.
3 is someone that I actually met in real life, and no one else really knew that he was him. Jason Hansen. I met Jason Hansen at a grocery store in Birmingham, and the interaction was literally, hey, man, can you reach that for me? And I turned around like, you're Jason Hansen. And he's like, yeah, can you reach that for me? So I reached and got it for him. And I'm like, you're the same height as me. I don't know why you asked me to do that, man. And he just walked away and no one spoke to him. No one said anything. And I was like, Dad, that's Jason Hansen. He's like, really? I'm like, yes, that's Jason Hansen. That's him. And then he paid for his groceries and left. And I was like, that's the Lions all-time point scorer right there. And they're like, oh, because he's a kicker. I'm like, he's the best player in Lions history right now. I think we should all want to talk to this guy. But he was so consistent that I'll never forget. I went to a game with a friend, and the Lions had just scored a touchdown to tie it up with an extra point. And someone said out loud in our friend group, when's the last time Jason Hansen missed an extra point? They're like, I don't know. And then he promptly missed it. And we were like, oh, my God.
The thing is, though, is I feel like Jason didn't get talked about enough because he was so consistent. There wasn't controversy to have around that.
No, I mean, there wasn't.
And so he got forgotten, which is unfortunate. Kickers are so important in a football team. That's why there very rightly is so much discussion around Jake Bates.
It's not fair to him, but it's exactly it. It's like, what is it? 4th and 4, 37-yard line. All right, 3 points. Scored touchdown, extra point. Okay. I wouldn't look back. Jason Hansen hadn't missed an extra point in 7 years up until that point. So we don't let that friend come with us around sporting stuff anymore. You cursed Jason Hansen. You got some real bad juju, man.
Now it's in the record with thousands of people listening. That friend. Yeah. So just so you know, not named, but they have been publicly shamed.
Yeah, I don't want people throwing eggs at their house.
Number 2,
Matt Stafford.
Stafford.
I don't necessarily like everything about him. I do like the grit and toughness. I know people always bring up the fact that he separated his shoulder in a game, went back in there, and then scored on a quarterback sneak with his arm not really fully in its socket. You admire the grit, you admire the toughness, you admire that he came here and did the best he could with what he had. He was the quarterback for the 0-16 team, and that's definitely a stink. It's hard to wash off, but when you start throwing 5,000 yards in a season consistently, even if it's a bad season, people take notice. And obviously you saw what happened when he left to go to the Rams. He went from being this guy from a downtrodden team to apparently an NFL superstar that people should be paying attention to, where it's like he's been doing the same thing literally with the Lions for so long, and it was overlooked because it was a team that typically didn't make the playoffs. You see the talent. He got to the Rams. They won a championship the first year. They've been competitive still. I mean, obviously the Lions saw him in the playoffs last year. They'll see him first game of this season as well.
Look, I'm not mad at him winning a championship somewhere else as long as it wasn't against us. I'm fine with that. He worked so hard here. He deserved something for all of that toil and trouble in those dark eras of the Lions.
No, and the team didn't really do the best to build around him, and like he still found ways to like sling the ball to whoever he could, who was not his number one target, to get what he needed to get. And that's, again, I hate to do one of these little Detroit things, but that's such a gritty thing to do, where it's like they want you to go build a car and you have a rubber band and 4 pretzels. It's like, I still have to build a car.
It's interesting to me because we're going to get to this number one pick in a second, but this number one choice, we were talking about like the destitute eras of the Lions. This is only the beginning of the Sheila Hamp Ford like ownership of the Lions, and it's a completely different place. And I really do think she deserves a lot of credit for turning around some of this stuff up top, and a lot of praise for that. And it's interesting to me to see all this history, but only this pick is really in her era.
I was really critical when it came to her as well, because I was like, oh, the new owner,
but
is she going to put on shoulder pads and play? And she didn't, but she got the right people to put on shoulder pads and play, and the Lions actually are playing competent ball. They got coaches in there who might not know exactly all the plays, but are getting these guys motivated in the right way, and she found a way to make people in the organization show that they care, which then shows that they care on the field, which then shows the fans that they care with the results, which then makes the fans care more. It's an Ouroboros of good things when you have someone come in who actually breathes a real new breath of fresh air. And while we give Dan Campbell a bunch of praise, like Sheila Hamp Ford for sure came in and was like, we're doing this and this is what we're going to do it. And it's been working super well so far.
Leadership matters. Okay. Number one,
I feel like if I did not mention this person on the list, I'd probably get jumped by myself. But Calvin Johnson.
Really?
Is...
So I guess my statement isn't true.
There are some players that are currently that I think could be on this list now, but I feel like putting Aiden Hutchinson over someone, or putting Penei Sewell over someone, or Amon-Ra St. Brown over someone right now who's been there for so long and done this for more than 2 or 3 years is a little bit disrespectful, in my opinion, in terms of time. I do think that they, like I said, Charlie Sanders, all of his records, most of them are now Sam Laporta's. So I'm
interested to hear you say this, because I really thought you would go a little bit like throw a bone to the modern era. I really just assumed it would be interesting.
I think Penei Sewell will be on this list very soon. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown will be on this list very soon.
How much time do they need, or do they need to win a championship?
I mean, the other players didn't win a championship. I mean, if they win a championship next year, I'll change my mind, but the other players didn't win a championship, and they were still just... Penei Sewell will be a Pro Bowler for like 10 years, 12 years. Amon-Ra will be a Pro Bowler for like 7 or 8 years. Get a Pro Bowl, get some more stuff in the next few years, and like, yeah, I would happily put you in my top 10. I mean, some of these players in my starting 11, starting for offense and defense, are on the list as well, but like, chronologically, I think that you need a few more years. But a lot of these players, it's a thing. But Calvin Johnson, in my opinion, is the single most important Lion in the history of the Lions, because in that one year where they were terrible, he gave the Lions something to look for, and it was him breaking the most receiving yards in a single season. And it was amazing because not only did he break the record, but he broke the record with practice squad guys across from him. The other team is like, look, the Lions are 2-12, 2-13. They're only throwing the ball to one guy. Put 3 people on him. Do not let him do anything. And he would consistently go up against 2 people, 3 people, maybe two and a spy and get the ball out of the air. It's one of those things where like I wondered how Vikings fans felt with Randy Moss, where it's like you could just throw the ball up there and he's going to go grab it. And I'm like, I'm so envious of having a player like that. And then Kelvin Johnson came and I was like, yeah, it's so fun to watch him go in the end zone with three people and be like, he's got it. That's an insane thing to think about another person. But he was so fast. He was so big. So great in the community. People loved him. When the Lions and him had their falling out, it's one of the few times I've ever seen people say, yeah, the team needs to let him keep his money. Very rarely do people get on player sides. It's always the team said this, you want to do something different, follow the team. When they split for their while before they came back together, people are like, yeah, they did Kelvin dirty. Give him his money. Like, what's wrong with you? And that just shows how beloved he was, not just on the field, but off the field as well. So for me, I think that makes him the most important player in Detroit Lions history from that point. But again, like I said, players playing now, I think have a very good chance of being on that list very soon if they continue at the rate they're doing right now.
Well, we are going to post this up on our website, send it out in our newsletter. And I think over time, let's release out your starting lineups, because I think those would be really fun for people and a different way to look at things as we go into the beginning of the Lions season, because like there's only so much like preseason camp stuff. I know people are really into it because the team is projected to do well, but I love taking a look back before we get started. All right, to end the show, we need to mention something that's put together by some friends of the show and something that if you want to have a rockin' good time, you're going to want to check it out. It is the Hamtramck Labor Day Festival. Music, food, all kinds of stuff in Hamtramck, Michigan. Been around for forever and a day. Fletcher, I know that it's something that you're looking forward to. I was going to run down a couple of the headliners over the 3 days. But before I get into that, what do you want to add about the Hamtramck Labor Day Festival coming up?
I don't know if it's this year for sure. I know last year and the year before they had wrestling.
They do.
Wrestling as well. So get you an elephant ear, go watch some wrestling on the ring. You said they have some headlining music. I think GMAC Cash is going to be
Yeah, why don't we walk through that really quick? So GMAC Cash and Sada Baby is going to be on Saturday.
Them getting Sada Baby for the Hamtramck Labor Day Festival is insane. That's a big grab in today's music for a Detroit artist. He's an internationally known artist, so that's a very big grab to have there.
On Sunday, there is Mike Skill of the Romantics, the Polish Muslims, and Sloan. I know there'll be a lot of listeners into Sloan and very excited about that. And then Monday, okay, you've got none other than special guest Jack White with The Henchmen on Monday night at the South Stage at 8 p.m. And you can go to hamtownfest.com, see all of this stuff, but the music acts, everything else, like, there's the thing. I know that there's been a lot of changes in Hamtramck lately, but like this festival, places like Planet Ant, things like that, just really reinforce like this history of being this creative, interesting, different, in a good way place that has historically been like this hive for music and artists and comedy and all these things that you just like. Hamtramck Labor Day Festival has a totally different vibe than Arts, Beats, and Eats. And I mean, to each their own, but that's some rock and roll in Hamtramck, man.
Yeah. Another thing that's happening Monday is that it's the Hamtramck Labor Day Yacht Club canoe races, which is a boat race thing, which I'm sure people have seen video of, where they push
you.
Yeah.
Are you coming back?
Yeah. Katie convinced me for one more year, so I'll be there Monday.
Are you saying this may be your final boat race year, Fletcher Sharpe?
I'm not saying maybe. I got one more in me, and I would like to win it so we can go out on top. So I can just.
What time is that Monday if people want to cheer you on?
Or heckle me. Noon Monday is when the races start, and it's all the bars and other businesses get these kind of push car boats together, and they push them down Jos Campo, forward and back. And as people might ask, Hamtramck's landlocked. What do you mean boat race? People throw water balloons to simulate the water, so it's very fun. Please don't aim for people's heads because it's just not a fun time. But something to your point about the difference between Arts, Beats, and Eats in this festival, because again, not to like compare festivals, but something I've never seen before in person, only seen on television and never seen before. After the yacht races is over, typically the street is full of like broken balloon parts and garbage and everything. And after they're done celebrating the winners and then cheering and clapping for the people who took runner-up, the next 10 minutes, every single person on that street, including the little children, all pick up garbage. And after 10 minutes after the race, 10, 15 minutes, Joe's Campa looks the way it did before the race started. That's such respect for your community that even in the midst of having 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 twisted teas or 2 hearteds or whatever you drink or something, to be like, oh, we got to clean up real quick. Hold on. That's beautification that even the most well-respected cities could not dream of having. That kind of enforces the whole, this is a community thing. We very much care about our community, but we also can have a little bit of fun too. And like, I appreciate seeing displays like that.
And by the way, there are a number of stages. I don't want to give Arts Beats and Eats short shrift, and we might talk about that a little bit later in the week. But just to give you an idea for the lineups over there at their big national stage, for Arts Beats and Eats, that'll be Cheap Trick and Tesla on Friday, the Cadillac 3 and Dustin Lynch on Saturday. Sunday will be the Gin Blossoms and Chevelle. And then 7:30 Monday is Keith Sweat. So you've got Keith Sweat versus Jack White in basically the same time period. No shade to Arts Beats and Eats. I'm picking Jack White.
I mean, I'll also be at Arts Beats and Eats later that day after the races because I will be seeing Virginia Violet and the Rays.
Ooh. Thornetta Davis is going to be up at the national stage there, too, on Monday.
Partially because the music is good, but partially because the lead singer is best friends with my girlfriend. So we will be there to be supportive for 2 reasons. Both really great festival this weekend. I'm sure it'll be definitely talked about more on later episodes, but just to dip your toes in case you were looking for something to do. That's something definitely to do this upcoming weekend.
Big episode with you, Fletcher Sharpe. It's always good to see you, man.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Also, it is great to see our members on Patreon, patreon.com/DailyDetroit. Look, here is the reality. With the internet the way that it is and focused on hits and things needing millions of views to even make a few bucks, local media needs local support more than ever. Sure, we do get some local underwriters. Always glad to have it. You can email me, dailydetroit@gmail.com. We're definitely building that out. We're going to be doing more events and all that stuff. But local media requires local support. So patreon.com/dailydetroit. Would be glad to have you. Thank you, Larry, for your question. We're going to be posting a bunch of this stuff on our newsletter as well. With that, I'm Jer Stays.
And I'm Fletcher Sharpe.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit. Talk tomorrow.